Змістимося, так? Щоб він там не бігав по залу. Так.
У нас о 3 годині особливо, щоб ми друга 50 закінчили, все прибрати. Ну, я про те, щоб ми теж це все не розтягували.
Зразу стопи ми замовляємо.
Так, ну тоді там зараз за першої розмови можна починати, так? Сідати.
Так, тут Тарас наш.
Тут Юсов буде, просто щоб він запізниться.
Сідайте.
Там не дорого.
Тут Тарас, ти сидиш.
Зараз трансляція буде і потім запис.
Як знали.
Автора цієї ілюстрації є особливий зв'язок з
The 14th of February, the media center of Ukraine and Ukrinform works. I'm Oleksandr. We will be talking about 2 years of the information war, conclusions and prospects. We have here Taras Shevchenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. We will be joined by Andriy Yusov, speaking for the main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense. We have here Oleksandr Melnychenko, speaker for the Security Service of Ukraine. We have also Ruslan Deynychenko, StopFake. So, Mr. Shevchenko, soon it will be 2 years since the full-scale invasion of Russia. And of course, there's information warfare. Which weapons are used by the Ukraine in this sphere? Can we convincingly say that we win on the information space? Thank you for your question. Thank you for coming here. Quite a lot of people, which is an evident proof of the importance of this topic. And my colleagues will have a lot to say as far as conclusions are concerned. I would like to make some opening remarks, both about conclusions and later the colleagues will talk about the book that you see here, and which is sort of an information summing up of what's going on. I just want to give you a general idea about several messages. First, for the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, it is important, it has been important to pay attention to the institutional component of the work against propaganda and disinformation. And it was important to create the Center of Strategic Communication and Information Security, to have a team of experienced people to work in different directions. And Ihor Solovei, who is head of this center, will talk about this. I don't want to look ahead. And the institutional approach, we have two centers in Ukraine that work with propaganda and disinformation. I think that this approach is correct. Last week, at one of the international events, I took part online in it, but the event was happening in Sweden, and Sweden has established a separate center that is working in the context of counteracting the psychological influences and threats. And in January 2022, Sweden has created this institution, which regrettably is the trend, both before the full-scale invasion and now, to counteract the informational threats. Another thing which is, I would say, is a doctrine related, is the strategy of information security approved in December 2021 by the decree of the president, and the plan of actions was passed later during the invasion already. This is a strategy that embraces the strategy of state bodies, and it includes classic security things, the counteraction to disinformation, media literacy, but also some positive legal things like the protection of the rights of journalists, the openness of the state. Another parallel with Sweden, where the head of the center said that information resilience is based on the freedom of press, on the openness of the government, and on the fact that society has to be qualitatively informed about what's happening. So the strategy of the information security of Ukraine includes these components. And now Ihor Solovei will talk about the activity of the Center of Strategic Communications and Information Security. We are here to sum up the past almost 2 years. What are the results of Ukraine's work in the information space, and what have we done in order to disrupt the enemy's plans? Thank you for coming to this event, and I'll be brave enough to start with the results. On the basis of our everyday work, starting from the 31st of March 2022, we can say that there are certain trends that are based not as much on subjective perception, but on objective facts. And the first trend and the first conclusion that we may arrive at over these 2 years of the information warfare is that the main tasks of the Russian propaganda, which had put itself at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, were not reached. First, the major task at the beginning for them was to entice Ukraine to the lack of resistance. We all remember how even before the war started, our media were permeated with the information about the massive movement of Russian troops to the borders of Ukraine, how media was highlighting the military training going on next to our borders, and all this was to show the strength and presumable invincibility of the so-called Second Army in the world, and in this way to entice Ukrainians to think that resistance is impossible. Simultaneously, they tried to divide the Ukrainian society. We remember Putin's address to the military, where he said that it is simpler to talk to and to agree with the military. Simultaneously, they sent a picture to the West that Ukrainians are neo-Nazis, Banderites, and terrorists, and they were also scaring the West with presumable Ukrainian development of chemical weapons, bacteriological and biological weapons, and nuclear weapons. So the Russian propaganda had a goal to remove Ukraine from the Western help. This has not happened, so we may consider that this Russian propaganda's task was not fulfilled. Not to tire you with a list of all the examples of the Russian creativity, I'll ask my colleague Maxim Mayorov to dwell on the book, on the collection of publications that we have prepared. This is the result of our 2-year-long work, starting from the first day of the war. For 2 years, we were reading and monitoring the Russian propaganda. So the result of this are the materials that are presented in this research. Thank you, Maxim. Could you please tell us what a reader would find in this book and how you collected these materials? Thank you, everyone who came here to listen to our presentation. Yes, it's true that today, in particular, we are presenting for the first time publicly this book, and this book is a summing up of almost 2 years of the work of the Center for Strategic Communication and Information Security during the full-scale invasion. Since when it started, we started to work almost 24 hours a day, and we were documenting what was happening, and we reacted to the events in the country in different ways. One of the products were the daily digests of Russian fakes and propaganda and Russian information threats. So every day there was such a publication, like an article that told about the attempts of Ukraine to ruin Ukrainian resilience with the methods of aggressive propaganda, disinformation, and fakes. We were providing debunking of Russian narratives and also some reviews and context why they appear. So these publications were coming out every day, and it's clear that over almost 2 years, this book contains daily materials. So it is, in fact, a chronicle on the basis of those daily materials. It embraces months from February 22 to November 23. And I will tell you that if we could put under the cover everything that we published, this book would be 3 or 4 times thicker. It is still rather capital, and here we have the essence, the adapted version of what we have done. It's meant for the publication, and of course not all the materials made it to the book, because when we were researching the specifics of Russian propaganda, we paid attention to the fact that major motives and plots of Russian propaganda are repeatable by laboratories, or, for instance, dirty bomb, and then it periodically surfaces, and there's no sense in repeating it every time. So this book reflects the dynamics and trends, but the emphasis is on defining the major directions of Russian propaganda. So it is done in the format of chronicle, but at the same time the book starts with the analytical publication, and before you go to read the chronicle, we wanted to give our readers an opportunity to get acquainted with the concentrated essence of what's published. So this is the experience of moderator in Russian propaganda for almost 2 years. We generalize there, we sum up the topics, the actors, and the participants of information fight against Ukraine, also the aspects of Russian propaganda on the occupied territories. And these 21 months are subdivided into 7 stages, during which this dynamics is seen, how the Russian propaganda has changed, starting from February to March 2022, when Russians had euphoria and thought that they will conquer everything very soon, and then the Ukrainian counteroffensives, then some stagnation, then winter, when the Russians hoped to break Ukraine's resilience with the attacks on the energy system. You can find all this on the pages of the book. As you see, this is a rather big book. It is not only thick, it is also weighty. There's quite a lot of illustrative material there. All the team of our center was working on it. So this is rather a quality publication, and the Ministry of Culture, and thanks to the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, this book is for free. You can even now take one of the copies with you, and of course there will be a PDF electronic version accessible to all who want to get acquainted with the results of our work. And the advantage of this book compared to the websites is that, the websites are not eternal. We don't know what will happen to our sites or our partner sites within 2 years, but the book will linger, and it will be accessible to the historians who write the history of this war and the information war. And in some time in the future, this book will be one of the main sources for researchers. I would like to underline that we have prepared this publication not only for history. We do hope that it will be useful for law enforcement bodies that investigate the crimes. The book will be handy in forming accusations against Russian war criminals. And to sum it up, I want to single out that history and the story goes on, the war goes on. And we see how even now, at this moment in time, the Russians have local successes at some directions. We see what's happening in our partner countries along the perimeter of our country. And of course, there's quite a contribution of the Russian propaganda machine in these events. So this history is being written. We continue to monitor it, and my colleagues will tell you about the future. We have here Andriy Yusov, who is the speaker for the Intelligence Directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Of course, the history of Russians undermining operations goes back for decades, and they are now using the textbooks from 1960s and later for their work. What is changing and what remains? First of all, thank you, the Center for the Strategic Communications and the Information Security, for our joint work during the entire period of the full-scale war. And of course, this is our joint product, and the one voice that was provided by the Ukrainian Defense Forces with the Center of Strategic Communications and Information Security is very important, because this allowed to kill most of the Russian fakes, to reveal their lies, and to prevent them from entering the minds of Ukrainians, and also to a certain extent in the West. But why these books are needed? Most of the Russian myths are repeated many, many times, and even from generation to generation. And this means that they should be rejected regularly, and sometimes you should also repeat the same arguments. Regrettably, it is not enough to once say that and prove that this is the Russian lies, because they will come back to it in a month or several months, and you will have again to reveal their actions. And many people in the world would be asking about it. I hope that this publication will be in English, Chinese, Arabic, because Russia uses very often the fact that the countries of the global south do not have enough information about Russian crimes and Russian invasion of Ukraine. And in many countries we see now electoral processes that the enemy is trying to actively use in their favor, and they regard every election in every country as a battlefield to damage Ukraine and try to help the forces that oppose the help to Ukraine, and some of them even justify Russian aggression against Ukraine. So the Russians are using all the resources to wage propaganda or information war. And because as expensive as this may be, this is still cheaper than new planes, new tanks, or seagoing vessels, which, by the way, the number of which, by the way, today decreased by one. And it is symbolic that we have the Russian naval ship on the cover of this book. Of course, the struggle will go on, the fight will go on. Traditionally, there are two key directions: the attempt to influence Ukrainians with propaganda, to destabilize situation, to divide the country within, which will help the enemy on the front line. And of course, a separate direction is democratic countries of the West, where they say that not everything is so clear, so clear-cut. They tell about the presumed crimes of Ukraine, about our stupidity, about biolaboratories, And in the global south, you can hear the cliches that we heard during the Cold War, the cliches of 1970s. And of course, there was a certain vacuum there as far as the information is concerned. So the challenges are huge, but the fact that for almost 2 years of the full-scale war, and of course almost 10 years of Russian aggression against Ukraine, Ukraine does not only hold its ground, but also wins in the information war. This is very important, because I say that you cannot even compare our potential with theirs as far as resources are going to go. And of course, that's a effort of the defense forces and experts and researchers and the information volunteers. And of course, what is important is that truth is on our side, and Ukraine defends itself from genocidal war and unjust aggression. Of course, there are some factors that help us win the war, and I am sure that it will continue to be so. Oleksandr, but how Ukraine manages to do this? What are the tools, and how the security service reacts to the challenges of the information war? First of all, I would like to say that propaganda and information operations are part of the aggressive war. This is a clear-cut legal definition. Crimes against peace, the security of humankind, and international law and order. This crime is being committed by specific people in the Russian Federation and specific special services. And as far as all those people are concerned, there's a criminal proceeding by the Chief Directorate of the Security Service of Ukraine are investigating this, and not only those who shoot and not only those who launch missiles will answer in courts, but also propaganda workers and people who abet in information operations of Russia. They will be brought to criminal responsibility. As far as directions are concerned, the Russians are working along the same messages and directions that they started in 2014. We see that this year they will try to undermine our trust in the command and the higher political leadership, also the disruption of mobilization and disruption of help from our partners, and the destabilization of social and political situation in Ukraine, and the spread of panicking moods in Ukraine. We are documenting all these actions, including the actions by the Chief Intelligence Directorate and the Federal Security Service. We are investigating these facts in Ukraine, but then we pass them over to the international institutions so that those people are brought to responsibility on the international level as well. Mr. Deynychenko, the war has been raging for 10 years now, and the information war as well as the conventional war. So we would like to talk not only about the results, but about the prospects. What's your opinion, how the propaganda will work in the future? Well, if you listen to Putin attentively, then of course the war has been here for 350 years. The forecast is clear. The Russian propaganda does not stand still. It is developing, and we see ever more usage by the Russians of artificial intelligence. It is hard to counteract, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the book is a paper book, and I can see that many people will be smiling. Why should you publish a paper book? But you know, our project was founded in 2014, and we now see that our archive materials and our revelations from 2014, 2015, when we try to come back to them in online, we see that a lot of our materials and a lot of Russian fakes do not exist anymore. It means that some of the YouTube channels or Telegram channels, YouTube channels of Solovei or Skabeva are there no more. And I think that for researchers, the paper version of the book will be important because you have the proof collected here, and I think that this is first of all for the researchers who will write the history of today, the history of this war. It is important for them that the materials are there, they do not vanish, and so that we do not see in the future feature films made in Russia about hero Panfilovsi who didn't exist. And I think that we may well see the films about so-called heroes, Motorola and Ausa, scoundrels. And over the 10 years of work, we heard a lot of skeptical utterance that who needs another 1,000 of examples that the Russians are lying. Yeah, I say that all the proof and evidence collected in this book, you know, our organization has passed a lot, thousands of evidence pieces to Ukrainian police, and they're being investigated. And this will go to international bodies as well. And we're talking about narratives of yesterday and today. This is not for researchers only to make their conclusions. We see this now. We saw this in 2014. If we were treating those signals, those fakes, in a more serious manner, we would have probably understood that they were preparing for the invasion. A year before the large-scale invasion, our project has seen the signals that the Russians were preparing the casus belli, the reason for the invasion, which they used after a year. We understand that this research leads to the growth of the awareness of the population, and the research shows that Ukrainians are well prepared to resist the propaganda better than any of our neighbors, and we also give good grounds for the leaders of our country. You know, when the Russian channels were banned, but in 2014, 2015, there were both Ukrainian and international politicians who said this was censorship. You should not ban them. So I think that this leads to the fact that fighting propaganda is not only beautiful words, but also actions. Any questions from journalism? My question, I'm Yulia Lazishin from Detector Media. I have two questions. May I pose them? I'll start from the cry in the wilderness, because we can rejoice at the fact that we have won the information war. And I also thought about this, that people do not accept Russian propaganda until I went to my native Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast and talked to the so-called common people and heard what they are talking about. And this is a patriotic oblast. They were talking about mobilization. Yesterday I heard a wife of a military who said that all the help of our partners is to involve us into debts. So I think that those who are interested in media literacy know this anyway, but what to do with the so-called common people? About Telegram, in 2015, when Petro Poroshenko was the president, the networks Odnoklassniki and Vkontakte were banned, and this gave a positive effect. We see now that Telegram is used by the state authorities, but I think that someone should arrive at a difficult resolution and ban Telegram. Let me start. First, absolutely, agree absolutely. There's no limit to improvement. We should spread the information, and we at our center are working within the limits of the rights and mechanisms that we have provided by the state. However, our capacities are modest. This, however, does not mean that we do not work, and some of the projects aim at remote regions. We work with regions on different directions. As far as Telegram is concerned, I think Andriy will talk about this in more detail, but our position is that you should split this problem into two issues. Cybersecurity. As far as cybersecurity is concerned, Telegram is an absolute evil with obscure financing, with inexplicable security protocols, and one researcher of Telegram says, when you ask what are the proof, evidence of Telegram's link to Russia, you should rather ask where are the evidence of Telegram being not linked to Russia. So sooner or later, and I think sooner is better, we will have to arrive at a decision on this platform. As far as threats are concerned, of course, we should take them into account and recognize them and not diminish their significance. But I would say that the major criterion in this situation is the general public opinion and the general assessment of the actions of the aggressor country, our preparedness to resist, our preparedness to integrate with the European Union and NATO, and this means that we have withstood not only military but information aggression, but the attack goes on. And as far as mobilization is concerned, migration policy, these attacks will appear wave after wave. So every time we have work against them, and it's absolutely necessary to work in different platforms. As far as Telegram is concerned, yes, this threat is present and clear, and it's not about the individual users on this platform, but the major issues are about the platform itself, which contains major threats for the information and other kinds of security in our country. I think that we will hear the answer. I agree, according to our assessment, Telegram became source number one for fakes in Ukraine, very significant, and that we don't see any steps on the part of Telegram administration to stop such situation. Maybe there are some technological means to make the Telegram administration to purge the platform like this was done on Facebook. But I am very heartened by the fact that some of the networks are platforms doing this, like WhatsApp. I think that this will facilitate our work with Telegram, because we can threaten them with ban. The next question is going to be in English.
I've been in this war for 10 years. I spent more than 4.5 years on the front line. Information war is very critical. The Russian propagandists, for example, note that the building at the end of this street here still has a Soviet star on it. And they play this against us. Telegram, we know, is compromised by Russian FSB and GRU, but also TikTok, run by China. Russia uses this platform also for propaganda against Ukraine. How will all of you, Andriy, Yusov, and others, help us win this war against these platforms, which unfortunately too many people use?
Thank you.
Well, of course, we would like to have simple answers to these questions and have some magic button which switches off everything that carries threat. However, there's no such button. That's why Ukraine is building the communication with the administration of all the platforms in order to work according to transparent rules, both according to Ukrainian legislation and international plans. And this is the most difficult task with the Telegram. And this is our constant work, and it goes on many levels, both on the platform itself to create the content that will cover the target audience, but also where the normalization of the activity of these platforms is concerned. Still, there's quite a lot of work to be done. Hello, I am Christopher Sampson. My question is about Elon Musk.
We dealt with trolls. We dealt with independent small accounts. Now the top owner of a very influential platform held a space 2 nights ago to directly attack Ukraine aid. He literally is willing to take the entire platform as an individual and aim it at the Ukrainian aid. What do you think Ukraine can do to combat this large-scale attack? Дякую.
Прошу. Українською? Добре.
Thank you for your question. The support of Ukraine by all possible international partners is critically important for us, especially the support from the United States of America. So I think the measures being now affected by the Ukrainian diplomats and Ukrainian media people and politicians, including opposition politicians, I hope very much that this will result in a final positive decision by the American Congress that will provide for the help to Ukraine. Truth is on our side, and this is simpler to communicate truth. And Ukraine is with the coalition of the countries which are on the side of the light. So I hope that our tactical victories and our ultimate victories will be with us. I have three questions, brief ones. Maxim Kiyak, thank you for very fundamental and very needed work. Do you plan to translate it into English? Then to Maxim Mayorov, why there are 7 periods that you mentioned? And my question to Mr. Yusov and the speaker for the State Security Service. Will Russia be able to use some new painful spots, or will they just repeat what they are doing? I'll start about the translation. We do not want to scare our translator so that he remains with us, but I still hope that it will be published in English, at least the analysis that is on pages 1 to 20 in this book. There's chronology, there's the list of participants, there's a propaganda on the temporarily occupied territories, and yes, we will work about specific examples, and it will appear at least in the English version. Periodization. The trends are responsible for this. We have 21 months, and within these 21 months, we have to deal not only with every separate individual day, because the Russian information attacks are longer in duration. We had a lot of material, and we understood the trends and dynamics, and of course this is not does not correlate only with the planning of Russian information war generals. They also were correlated with the frontline situation, like for instance March and February and March of 2022, when they were elated and in euphoria. They thought that Kiev will fall rather soon, but then the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the autumn of 2022, which of course relates to how Russia reacted to its defeats. So you will be able to read about this in the book. And the third question, the painful issues, of course, they will use everything they can use, because the Russian services have a well-adjusted mechanism of monitoring all the processes in Ukraine, and they will hit these painful spots with the information weapons. And of course, mobilization, corruption, and some other things are among these. They are finding and defining those painful spots, and they hit them with all their might. There's no time for further questions. We were talking about the results of the 2 years of the information war. We will come back to you at 3 p.m. and we will talk about defending the Ukrainian skies. And of course, you can take the books. Please leave, because if you have additional questions to speakers, you can talk to them behind the doors.